Welcome to Spark Infinity Office Hours. Actually, it is not office hours, it's until it sticks, where creative journeys unfold in real time. In these intimate sessions, our hosts and our guests open their creative playbooks to share fresh discoveries, current experiments, and hard won insights from their personal artistic past. Whether diving into recent breakthroughs or working through creative challenges, each Until It Sticks session offers a raw, unfiltered look at the creative process in action. Join us to explore the practical tools, mindset shifts, and unexpected revelations that shape our ongoing artistic evolution. The quote of the day goes something like this: an investment in knowledge pays the best interest. Who said that? Benjamin Franklin. Today's date is February 6th, 2025. We've got another wonderful guest with us today. She has a lot of experience, or extensive experience, in musical performance, or musical theater rather, and she's an education veteran. She also happens to be the founder of Phoenix Inspired Coaching. Joining me today is Maria Foster Luengo. She's got too many names, I don't know. How are you, Maria?
How are you, David Andrew? I'm really
What is
well,
good?
and thank you so much for that kind introduction. Yes, I am a school counselor and a life coach with Phoenix Inspired Coaching, and I have 30 years of experience in the public education system. So if you want to know anything about public education from K to 12, provincially or right across Canada, I am the person to talk to because I've got my pulse on the people.
I'm also someone with too many names, but Maria, what are two or three things you would like them to know?
Yeah, so what I'd like people to know is that my whole life has had a thread of social justice woven through it. I think ever since I discovered that I was different than my brothers because I was a girl and that my parents favored them, I immediately started my social justice work about equality, and I've done lots of work with the Two Spirit LGBTQ community, winning an award from the Pride Society for my work in making schools safe. And I speak four languages, which is my superpower. And my purpose in life is that kids be happy, that they be safe, and that they be seen and heard for who they are. And that is the commitment that I stand in every day when I do the work that I do with students and empowering parents to say goodbye to power struggles and say hello to real connections with kids.
Awesome. Let's talk a little bit about your musical theater experience. So, how did you get started in that?
Oh my gosh. So I have always loved music since I was a kid, and I don't come from a musical family. My mother grew up playing the piano, and when she married my father and moved to Canada from Mexico, we never had a piano in the house. She never taught us piano. She never gave us piano lessons or encouraged that. I actually got involved with music and musical theater in my elementary school. I remember trying out on auditioning for various parts. And when we were in elementary school, it wasn't so much an audition as the teacher picking who's going to be who in what production. So the first role that I ever had was playing Jesus in a musical. And I always thought it was interesting that I was the a girl playing a boy in a musical, and I really enjoyed that part. I dressed up in Jesus with a long robe and I had a beard. It was really great, and I sang a bunch of songs. And what I remember about musical theater is this incredible ability to express myself through music. Like it was as if it was another language. So by then I was already speaking Spanish, I was already speaking French, and it was like my third language. And what I enjoyed about musical theater was there was like this excitement about it, there was like this anxiety about performing in front of people. And what worked about musical theater is team and teamwork. Like we harmonized, we worked with other people. People had lines, I had lines, everyone had to know when to come in. So it was really this great opportunity to work with other people and learn how to get along and not get along, and how to be with whatever happens, because all sorts of things happen when you're doing musical with kids. You know, you're doing a run through and then Jamie barfs on someone's shoe, and then then everyone has to stop, and then we regroup as people. I had a great elementary school teacher at Margaret Pendlebury Elementary School, and I don't remember her name, but I remember she wore stage makeup every day to work, and that she had a background in theater, and she's the one who organized all the musicals. And after playing Jesus, my next role was the Cheshire Cat in Alice in Wonderland. And I still remember the dance moves. I still remember the song because, as you know from the book, the Cheshire Cat speaks in gibberish like, "'Twas brillig and the slithy groves did gyre and gimble in the wave. All mimsy were the borrow groves and the mom rats a grave." And so I do remember that from way back. I must have been in grade 4 or 5. And that's the other thing that's really great about music is that music often allows us to access memories that for me happened over 50 years ago.
Hmm.
And so I love that connection between music and memory. I'm sure that there are studies out there in which people use music therapy with Alzheimer's patients and people who have, cognitive memory issues, whether it be short term or long term. I'm sure that there's a total connection between memory and music. And then my parents did something which I thought was one of the worst things that ever happened in my life at the age of 16 during a winter break around December 24th or 25th. My father sat us down as a family and informed the entire family that we were moving within a week to a place called Vancouver, British Columbia.
Hmm.
And I was absolutely devastated. No, no, I was actually really
I
devastated.
believe it. I believe it.
I just, what was present for me was that I was 16 years old, and the only place I knew was St. Lambert, Montreal, where I grew up, my field hockey team, my musical theater group. By then, I was in high school. I was in a very small high school with about 500 people. I had my best friend Janice at the school, and there I was, my parents telling me that we were moving and we had no say in the matter, and nobody asked us how we felt about it. And I was so angry and resentful, and you have no idea. Like, I was angry and resentful for probably about the next 30 years until I got complete with it. And I remember arriving in Vancouver, and it was the first week in January. I was in grade 10. Everybody had their cliques, their groups that they belonged to, their best friends. In Vancouver, it was quite insular. I found people's parents went to school together, their grandparents went to school together, their great grandparents went to school together. I was beginning to wonder, does anybody ever move in or out of Vancouver? So everybody knew each other, from like their parents knowing each other to their grandparents knowing each other. And I arrived that first day at school, and I sat down with the school counselor who didn't really have a connection with me. I didn't know her. And she sat down to give me a schedule in the middle of the year. And basically, she gave me all the academics that I required. And then she put me into choir because there was space in that course. And she put me into drama because there was space in that course. And I remember walking in to my first class, which happened to be choir. And picture this, I open up the wooden door, and I don't understand that when I open it up, I see risers with 100 people facing me. And there's a
Wow.
choir director with his back to me, and he's playing the piano. And I walk in, and I don't, like, they're doing a warm up. And I'm curious as to how do I interrupt this without everybody looking at me? But I've already walked into the room and everybody's looking at me. I had this like nauseous feeling in my stomach. I totally wanted to throw up. I wanted to run out the door for sure and just like block it with my body and not go inside. And unfortunately, by then, the choir teacher had seen that everybody was looking in my direction. He turned around. He asked me who I was. I said in a very low voice, "My name's Maria." He then said, Are you like a soprano or an alto? Do you know? And I said, I don't know. I didn't know. I never knew. No one ever told me whether I was a soprano or an alto.
Hmm.
And I had been in musical theater in elementary school. I had been in a church choir, but no one ever told me whether I was an alto or a soprano. So he asked me to sing a couple of bars in front of 100 people. That was fun. And I just thought, oh, the world needs to just crack open and I need to slip through this because I have got to go to an alternate universe. This is just so anxiety provoking for me. Anyway, as a people pleaser, he played a couple of notes. I sang a couple of notes with that. I'm grateful that I have perfect pitch. And he looked at me and said, "Oh, yeah, you're a soprano, go stand over there." And that was the start of my journey with the choir group. And yeah, it was a great choir. I was super inspired by our choir teacher. He was exceptional at teaching and creating team and teamwork in choir. I know that we participated in lots of competitions and we won lots of competitions. And in fact, somewhere in grade 10, 11, or 12, we recorded an album that I still have about music that we sang and put on there. And I think it was very groundbreaking to have a teacher actually record an album with their students, and I thought it was fantastic.
Hmm. I'm curious, did you actually come to enjoy Vancouver though? Because it seems like you stayed.
Well, yeah, I am currently in Vancouver, full disclosure. So so I guess, yeah, so there I am, and I'm 16 years old, and then I remember not having any friends for sure when I first arrived. I mean, it's the middle of the year. Everyone's got their friends. They've been friends with each other since kindergarten. I come along. Everyone's trying to speak French to me because I'm from Montreal, but I'm actually not francophone, and I do speak French, and their French was absolutely deplorable. So I
Hmm.
didn't even understand what they were saying because I'm like, that's actually not French. It's comment ça va, not comment ça va. And uh, I befriended a group of people, or maybe they befriended me. I'm not sure how it happened, but somewhere along my journey in grade 10, 11, and 12, I met up with a very eclectic group of people. And out of that group, one of them became a medical doctor, one of them became a psychiatric doctor, one of them became an exceptional clothing designer, and currently lives in New Jersey and spent her entire career in the clothing industry in New Jersey, working for all sorts of famous designers. And there was myself who went into teaching, and it was a really great group of people. And I did carry that anger and resentment about being moved to Vancouver against my will for about the next 40 years, to be honest.
Wow.
Um, one of the interesting things that happened in high school was we did have musicals. I auditioned for every one of them. After all, I was in choir, I was in drama. People encouraged me to audition. And I never was chosen to be in any of the musicals. And that was devastating because I was a very open, social, I thought I was a good actor. I thought I could sing. At that point, I was taking some music lessons. And that was really interesting because one of the best singers in the choir, Patty, her name was Patty something. She was taking lessons. I found out through somebody who found out through somebody who found out through somebody who her singing teacher was. And I immediately signed up and I took singing lessons with her. So I was thinking, I'm involved in all this choir and theater and I'm taking music lessons. I've got to be able to audition and get a part. I never did get a part. And I was angry and resentful about that for many, many years too.
Hmm. Well, we do share something in common there, and I guess I wouldn't say it's exactly the same, but it's kind of a parallel experience. Which, when I was returning from Japan to Canada, we ultimately ended up moving back to Calgary. I was aligned with the decision because it was after my father had passed away,
Mm,
and we made the choice to be surrounded by family.
yes.
So I was aligned with that decision. but I don't know if I ever fully. I embraced
Understood.
Calgary, but did I fully
Mm,
love it? Because like when I went to grade 9, same experience as you. It was a brand new junior high school, but everyone knew each other already.
yes.
So breaking into a social circle was, I think it ended up being nerds and geeks,
Yes.
which I'm conversing. I don't know if that's the exact right place for me in a social circle, but it is what it is.
Hmm.
I think I need to hit the rewind button a little bit too, and talk about like how is it that you ended up with that Jesus role? It seems like there might be a story there.
Well, my parents, so my mother is Catholic, my father is a non-practicing Protestant, and my mother wanted me in a Catholic school.
Uh,
So I was in a private, was that in public? I think in Montreal we have like several different school districts. One of them is the public Catholic school, the private Catholic school. I don't know. I don't know if we call them public. I think we call them public Catholic schools. And I went to a public Catholic school. We didn't wear uniforms, so it wasn't like a private school. And I played Jesus in, I'm pretty sure it was either there or Margaret Pendlebury, and I'm not flat. But I did end up playing Jesus. And there was this one song that we sang. From Jerusalem to Jericho, the road is long and dark. And then the choir would sing, it's long and dark from Jerusalem to Jericho. Anyway, how I ended up playing Jesus, I have no idea. And I don't remember that. And it was a really great experience. And I was awesome. I'm just putting it out there.
right on. Is I'm guessing musical theater is still something that's a passion for you today, right?
Oh my gosh. So when I realized that so I did some personal work around some anger and resentment that I've been carrying around for many years. The first thing that I resolved was the anger and resentment that I had towards my parents to moving to Vancouver, BC, which to me seemed like a completely different country. The people were different, they
Yeah.
acted different, they spoke differently, they had different customs, and I honestly thought I was in a different country. Um, the second thing that I resolved was this whole thing with happened with my auditions in high school and how I wasn't picked. And then I made it mean that I didn't have any talent. Well, for the next many, many years after I graduated from high school, I'd sing at a karaoke bar, maybe with my friends when we were out. I'd be at a birthday party and sing happy birthday. I'd be singing at the campsite or something. And strangers would come up to me and say, oh my gosh, you sing really well. Like, are you in a choir? Do you do opera? Like, are you in musical theater? Like, you seem the kind of person who would be on stage. You're very animated. You know, you move your hands around. You seem comfortable talking to people. And I'm like, yeah, no, I'm a teacher in a high school. And they were like, "What? Like you didn't do any musical theater?" And I said, "No, I didn't do any musical theater." And they're like, "Well, why not?" And I said, "Well, I auditioned and then I wasn't picked and I had it that I didn't have talent." And they're like, "No, no, you can actually sing. Like you can carry a tune. You seem like you can act." And so between high school when I wasn't picked for the auditions to that moment, the only other time I'd been on stage was when I was working at a high school in which we were doing a production of Fiddler on the Roof. So the kids were doing that production, and the music director and I were thick as thieves. We were like the best of friends. And he came up to me one day to say, our Fiddler on the Roof, who is in the band at school, has decided that they have a fear of heights, and now they will not sit on the top of the roof to start off the entire musical, where you start off with the solo with the fiddle. Na 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 na. I don't know what the tune was. I don't think it was. If I was na, na. I don't know if it was that one, but anyway, they didn't want to sit on top of the roof because when they tried to go up the ladder, they realized that they had a fear of heights.
Hmm.
So he said, the show starts next week, and I'm looking for somebody that can just get on the roof, play the fiddle, and start the show. And he said, look, you weigh like 100 pounds wet, and you're a responsible adult. Would you be willing to be the fiddler on the roof? And I'm like, it's the kids show. It's not like typically the adults in the schools don't play roles in the musicals that kids have. But then I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute. I have been through this rodeo once where I auditioned and I didn't get a part. And I'm like, if somebody's offering me the part, why would I say no? Like, what would be a logical reason for me saying no? And they don't have time enough to get a kid up there. None of the other kids want to do it, and everyone's been offered the part. And I'm like, I looked him straight in the eye and I said, Mr. David Nix, I accept your offer and I will be the fiddler on the roof.
Hmm.
Now, what your audience doesn't know is that I don't play the violin or the fiddle.
Right.
Okay, so this is what I did. I took a videotape. I made a videotape of the student who was supposed to be the fiddler on the roof from behind, so that I could imitate every stroke. And what that allowed me to do was look as if I was actually playing the fiddle. So what the audience heard was him playing the fiddle. What they saw was me playing it and thinking that I was the one playing it.
Hmm.
And what else your audience doesn't know is I also have a fear of heights.
Yeah.
Why would I want to be up this rickety thing that the kids built? And I've got to get up on the roof in the dark and get down in the dark. So they roll me out on the stage when it's all dark and the curtains are closed. Then they open up the curtains, the light goes on, and I'm spotlighted. Anyway, I did it anyway, despite the fact that I had a fear of heights, because I was going to cause this breakthrough around fulfilling on something that I didn't fulfill on as a high school student. And I was great. And everyone thought that I was the person playing the fiddle. In fact, they
Hmm.
thanked me about how well I played. I thanked them back. Yep, I really do play well, and that wasn't me. And then
Well,
after that, I wanted to be on stage again, so I auditioned for a musical theater group in Vancouver called the Broadway Chorus. They've been around for over 30 years. They write their own musicals and perform them twice a year. I auditioned. Surprisingly enough, they accepted me into the group. And there I find myself only wanting to be in the choir. Don't give me a solo because I don't know and I don't know if I want to do it and it seems like a lot of work. And I joined the group. I ended up with two speaking roles and had such a great time. I have to say, up until the performance, I think at every rehearsal that we had, I was feeling rather anxious. And once I got on stage, I was fine. But it was incredible to be able to learn how to sing my six-part harmony, because we sing in six-part harmonies, find my lane in which I was singing in and maintain it, then incorporate the lines that I had and the choreography. Oh
hmm.
my gosh, like that really took something and it was amazing. And it was so great to have approximately 40 of my friends in the audience, right in the front row, coming to every show, cheering for me, rooting for me, giving me great feedback. And at the end of the production, they all looked at me and they said, oh my gosh, like that was so amazing. What else have you performed in? And I was like, well, I had a non speaking role as a fiddler on the roof. And then I didn't do anything since I was in high school. And they're like, what? And I'm like, yeah, this is kind of like my first official show. And they were like, oh my gosh, we would have never have known if you didn't tell us. It just seemed like it was you being super comfortable on the stage. And it was as if I wasn't even acting like I was Carol Channing, because that's one of the characters I played. And I was the witch. That was the other character that I played, this witch in the show. And so it was really amazing. And I definitely will continue with Broadway Chorus because music is a way of expressing myself in a way that I can't do it in any other way.
Hmm.
Yeah. And it brings so much joy. Like, now I'm going to cry. It just brings so much joy. And it brings so much joy to other people. And what I love about musical theater is I love the music, I love harmonizing, I love choreography. And I really enjoy those moments, although a part of me doesn't, when somebody misses a line or somebody bumps into somebody or somebody doesn't come on stage who is supposed to come on stage to start the next scene. And somehow, as a group, we all sort it out. Like somehow there's this like telepathic knowing that it's all going to be sorted out. And that's the magic of theater. The magic of theater is when you aren't singing, it's the music that's singing you, and you aren't acting anymore. It's like the words just have a life of their own beyond you as an individual. And I don't know how else to explain that.
Music is amazing, and I don't even know if we'd be doing these interviews at all if not for my passion of music in the first place. Similarly, I love theater. I've been many times. Actually, got to go on field trips in like grade nine to Theater Calgary. That's one of the great things about that school, I have to say. And it's clear that you are a performer. You also did some curious photo shoots for the calendar. So,
Yes, yes, I did. I I decided one year I was working in a high school and I put together a Halloween costume really, really quickly. And I decided that I was going to be a fairy. I made it the night before. There's great things that you can do with a couple of extra yards of fabric and a glue gun. Let me tell you, there's amazing, amazing things that you can create. And in that moment that I dressed up the next day as a fairy and I walked into work, I dressed up as Tinkerbell. I really had this like, kind of like this real connection with fairies. And that year, I created a calendar where I was a fairy with incredible wings and hats and leather masks. And I sent it to all my family and friends around December the 15th. They received it for the Christmas holidays, and I didn't put a return address on the envelopes. So all these people from around the world, Mexico, Montreal, Ottawa, Spain, opened up these envelopes to see this like magical being with glorious wings and pixie stardust and all this other stuff, and in these incredible sceneries, like really incredible backdrops in nature. With incredible vistas and views, and the colors of the leaves, and incredible flowers. Um, and I think most of them didn't know who actually was in the photos until they got to like the third or fourth month. And then they realized it was me. And that's when the phone calls started coming in saying, "Oh my gosh, we had no idea it was you." And it was amazing. And it was so playful and it was so much fun.
hmm. So now to segue over to another theme for today, and I
Okay.
know that you're banging on all cylinders already. I was going to use another analogy about guns, but then I was like, I don't want to talk about, even though we might get into some violence related things. Uh, I figured I'd use that turn of phrase instead. But arts in the education system, we've been hearing
Yeah.
about this for a while. By now, like, because they've been cutting all kinds of programs, and I'm sure by now we have some like tangible measures of the way in which it's impacting kids or not impacting kids. So let's get into that side of things.
Yeah. So music education in public schools in Canada from kindergarten to grade 12, they very significantly across the country with disparities in regards to availability and
Mm.
quality. There's a 2012 study that looked at the state of musical education across the country, and what they found was some communities had super robust programs with dedicated teachers and adequate funding, while others had no music programs, or they didn't have teachers to teach them, they didn't have proper funding for them. And so that's what we're dealing with in regards to the spectrum: people who've got it all and people who don't have any or a little bit. Yeah.
Hmm.
So, what some of the challenges that we're facing in public education, and this is not just in music programs, is limited funding and insufficient resources, and a lack of qualified music instructors.
Huh.
So, those are the three biggest challenges that we have in regards to musical education programs, and this results in students having unequal access
Yeah.
to great music programs. In 2022, there was another study done, and again, it echoes what was happening in 2012. So I'm going to say that provincial governments who are responsible for the funding of public education, not the federal government, they have not, they don't understand what the impact is of not having robust music programs in school, and they don't understand what the connection is with great music programs and school success in other areas.
So it sounds like it varies considerably by province, and some provinces prioritize it more than others. In fact, it probably varies somewhat within provinces, even.
It's
But
both. It's across
okay.
the country and it's by province, and it's even you can break it down by school district. In school
Wow.
districts where you have a superintendent who's out to champion music because they understand the connection between music and cognitive development,
Yeah.
music and academic achievement, music and improved test scores, music and more kids graduating from schools with music programs, and how it enhances social skills, working with the group, working with like in harmony. Like when you create harmony with music, you can't have one instrument being louder than the rest of them unless that's the focus of the piece of music. But all of that, like improved attendance to school, improved behaviors and discipline, improved cultural awareness. Like we're going to be doing a music on rhythms from Cuba or Latin America, or in our school that I'm working in now, we did a whole piece on music from China for the Chinese New Year, and the students performed a piece.
So, I mean, it sounds like all upsides and benefits. Do you have any thoughts on, or did you find anything about why it's being deprioritized?
Yeah, so one thing I did find out is I couldn't find a study or document from a reliable source that said that somehow music programs are detrimental
Hmm.
to students. That does not exist. All
Right.
that exists is positive connections and science based connections and statistics on the value of having music programs in school. So, why is this happening across the country? Well, I think what happens is that we prioritize academic courses like math and science and English and social studies. And when it comes to a lack of funding, which is done provincially, and then they gave the funding to the districts, and the districts decides how the funding is distributed. Um, the first ones to get the shortest end of the stick are the programs like physical education, the programs like the music programs, the programs that are not academic focused. Those are the
Hmm.
first ones to have those cuts. And so when I speak to music teachers currently who are teaching music, what they shared with me was that there are a couple of issues that are happening. For example, in Vancouver with the Vancouver School Board, um, what teachers are sharing with me is that the number one issue is having an appropriate dedicated space for music classes.
Hmm.
Often they're in shared spaces, which doesn't work because who wants to schlep 25 xylophones out for the next class that's coming in to use it? That doesn't work. Some teachers teach in rooms that are used for the lunchroom, like a cafeteria. So the tables are brought out and then the tables are folded up and put away, and that's where they teach. Often there's, leftover lunches or garbage that they're cleaning up, and that doesn't work. They often don't have spaces to store their instruments because they need class sets of recorders, violins, drums, something, because you need that to teach, you know, to be able to teach kids with. So, a lack of funding for instruments, a lack of an appropriate space to teach, and a lack of qualified instructors. We don't have enough. We have a teacher shortage right across Canada and globally. So if we have a teacher shortage in the academic subjects, we're going to have an even more profound teacher shortage in programs like music. And the other challenge that the teachers are sharing with me is that, you know, they want full time jobs. So if it's a
Hmm.
part time job, they don't want to take that. They want a full time job. And so sometimes it's a half day here, 3 days there. You know, they often work in one or two schools if they want a full time job because they're not offering music as a full time load.
Yeah, because you just as well might go and teach privately. I mean, I
You
did
can,
that. I was a guitar teacher for a really long time, and I'm pretty much retired from that world. Very, very rarely I'll take on a student, even now. But I know that even on about 40 students per week, you can make a pretty decent living depending on what studio you're teaching at or what you're personally charging to do it. So I think the temptation is generally to go that way. Places like Long and McQuaid, I have experience with, and they paid very well.
yes, yes, I agree. You could set yourself up so that you could be a music teacher full time and possibly make more money
Yeah.
and set your own hours and, you know, do that. Um, what I don't see is a world without music. I have been fortunate that in most of my schools there has been a music program. Um, and for some students, that is what keeps them in school. They might not have an academic focus, or maybe they are really good at the academics and don't enjoy them. It's actually music that brings them more joy,
Hmm.
and that has them attending schools and be connected to the music teacher, the other music students. I know that in high schools they often travel, so you get to go on weekends with them and go to different competitions around the province. So they actually bond really well. They make lots of friends. They're a very tight community. Um, and when we look at the impact of music on improved test scores and attendance and behavior in school, I can't see a reason why we wouldn't have a music program. It does enhance what we're up to in schools. And for some kids, that is their unique way of self expressing themselves. They might be students who don't have a lot of facility around words, they might be not so outgoing. And maybe it's through the horn or the trumpet or the drums that they can express and connect with people at a completely different level, which is fantastic because um, 90% of communication is nonverbal.
Yeah. To share a little bit from my story, I mean, this show is not about me, but I was an academic misfit. So I loved art class and I loved music class in Japan growing up in elementary school. I didn't bother with music in junior high and high school because it seemed like it was band, not music class. I guess it's always the case that you have to learn something no matter what. If you take the classical curriculum, which many people do if they're pianists, you got to learn from that method. And if you're a guitarist, oftentimes you start off with something like the Hal Leonard method, which teaches you how to read. And reading is awful on guitar, by the way. I don't know if people know that, but it's the worst. It's not great. That's the much harder way to learn. I found out for myself. But I did start playing guitar while I was still in high school, and every spare minute that I could fill, whether it was lunch hour or a spare period where I didn't have a class, or sometimes even an art class because we were kind of left to our own devices, I would just play guitar a lot. And so, having had that opportunity, I don't know. I just can't imagine a world where that's not really encouraged or supported, you know?
Yeah, we those what do they call them? Extracurricular courses like shop class or home ec class or art class or music class, choir, drama. Super important that when we look at educating holistically, that we look at all aspects of one's self expression, including that of art and music and expressing yourself through wood or metal, whatever it is that you want. And it is important that we look at the holistic child when we look at education. It is not just about the academics,
Yeah.
And I think if there was a better understanding that music improves test scores, for example, for those parents that are fixated on the academics, they would be championing uh, the music programs. And, I would like to take the opportunity um, in your podcast to acknowledge the phenomenal work and dedication that our public school music teachers have for their programs, for their students, for their communities. It really takes something to run a program, and all I can say is that the kids are super grateful for it. They talk to me all about it all the time, where they've had music programs where they could hang out with the music teacher, or the teacher had a guitar club where all they did was hang out and play the guitar, but there was nothing structured in it. Like,
Yeah.
those are some incredible moments that people will always remember about high school. Is some of the connections that they made through music and the impact that music had on them.
What I'm about to say, I just want to let people know or make them aware that, like, I only say what I'm about to say because I want the education system to be better, and not just that. Having learned about your situation and the situation of other teachers, I want the working conditions to be better. I want you to feel like you're living in abundance, not like, you know, I can barely scrape by. I really don't like to see that. And so I just, I don't understand. Many people will go to college or university to get a degree and spend six figures on that. No guarantee of a job. And in fact, most people will actually end up having to start at Starbucks or, Tim Hortons if you're in Canada, or like McDonald's. It's just not. I mean, there's different systems out there. Europe's a completely different story, right? As far as getting an education. In fact, tends to be a better quality education over there. I remember going to school in Japan, and when I came back, I was like, there's like 2 or 3 years lag behind math class. Like, Japan's that much ahead generally in many of the academic areas. I was no good at math. I hated it. But but there's such a difference across the world, and I would just like to see things change.
Yeah, so right now, the uh, all 45,000 teachers in British Columbia are negotiating a contract with the government, which expires by June. And so we are looking at our working conditions, and we're really clear that our working conditions, like the rooms that we teach in, whether or not they have heat, whether or not they have windows, whether there's enough
Hmm.
chairs and tables, does directly impact the ability of kids to learn. And as you know, it's about educating the public that our working conditions, the amount of kids that we have in class, the composition and types of kids that we have in class, where we teach, does directly impact the ability of that child to learn. And this global phenomenon that we have with a shortage of teachers, a shortage of substitute teachers, a
Hmm.
shortage of music teachers, a shortage of principals, vice principals, and people wanting to get into administration, as well as support staff. Any possible position that you can think about, any possible position that happens in a school, like people who work in schools and school staff, those are all experiencing a shortage. And what's contributing to that shortage is the following: A, our working conditions;
Yeah.
B, and that includes, which people sometimes don't know about, the amount of violence and the amount of aggression that we're experiencing at the hands of students, and the amount of injuries that school staff are getting at the hands of students. I actually cover a podcast on that in my YouTube channel, Phoenix Inspired Coaching, if people would like to know more information about that. The other thing that's contributing to it is our salary. So the cost of living goes up by a certain percentage, and our salary is not keeping up with that. What you might not know is after 10 years as a public school teacher, there's no more salary increases, like you've reached your cap. So you stop at that, and the only increases you get are through contract negotiations. And despite the fact that we've had New Democrat Party that criticized the Liberal Party for 16 years for lack of proper funding for the education system, when they went into power, the NDP, they promised the teachers that they would champion education and fund it. and they haven't. And that lacks integrity. That was a promise that they made and they did not follow through on. And so we are now in the same situation that we were in with the Liberals. We continue to have a lack of public funding. And what I would like to see is that for those people who make decisions at the ministry level in the government about how much funding we get in public education, I would like those people to have their children go to public schools because many of those people have their children in private schools,
Yeah.
which, by the way, are funded 30 to 50% of their budget by the government, and they're double dipping because they also charge, for example, another $40,000 to $50,000 per student, depending on the school. And then you wonder why they have access to a pool on their property next to the school that they
Yeah.
privately own, and we don't.
Yeah. I don't know what the government has honestly accomplished in the last 9 years or so. So everything is kind of a mess. And
Yeah,
I'm,
and it's up to the public to get really curious about, is my child getting the best education possible? So if you're a parent or a caregiver in a situation where you don't like it that every day that a teacher's away, let's say they're away for a week with the flu, you get a different substitute teacher, and that's causing a lot of anxiety for your child, you need to go talk to the school district. If you have sometimes been trying to get in touch with the librarian or the resource teacher, but you can't because they're being pulled out to go into the classes that don't have a substitute teacher to go and teach them. You need to go and talk to the school board, your school trustees, talk to your MLA. You need to go have a conversation with them. And if you're a parent who's got a child who has some learning challenges, like a learning challenge, or they're neurodiverse, and you have it that they're not getting enough support, again, you need to show how you feel about that situation through your vote. And it is important that all parents get informed, all parents ask questions of teachers to find out what's really happening, and that they make informed decisions. However, when you have countries all around the world that will not properly fund public education, then you get people who are not properly trained in critical thinking skills, so they're not going
yeah.
to make informed votes when they vote, and therefore governments who don't have the best interests of the people get into power, and then they get into power without any questions, and we need people to start questioning how they're spending the money and where they're spending the money. Anybody listening to this call could start a music program at their school with enough advocacy and teamwork, and getting the parents involved, getting the school board involved, and really being committed and standing in that commitment for change and for providing the most holistic and best education for students.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better. And I don't want to make it sound like somehow Japan was idyllic, but what I do remember about my situation or my circumstance, my surroundings, I did have a desk, I did have a chair, I did have a
Yes,
cubby. I
yes.
had an amazing, because with schools in the mountains, I had an amazing view of adjacent mountains and the city of Takarazuka. And so it was actually a pretty amazing and beautiful environment in which to learn. And I
Yeah.
remember I have nothing but good memories really about elementary school. Well, mostly. There's still the typical, there's little bullying incidents or people you don't get along with. There's
Hmm.
always that. But
Hmm.
for the most part, I have pretty positive memories of that period of life. Japan's definitely got its own issues, though. We don't have enough time enough to get into that. But
No, and I know bleh, from a cultural perspective, what I understand from Japan is that they pay their teachers well and they have a very high regard for their teachers.
yeah,
That is not the case in Canada. What I'm finding about professions like nursing and teaching is because predominantly women were in those professions predominantly, and they still are. And I find that being a woman in a predominantly female profession in a patriarch has us paid less than if this was predominantly male dominated industry. And the interesting thing to note is that when we look at positions of power like district principals and superintendents, it's still predominantly men, even though women make up the people who self identify as female, make up most of the workforce. So we're also dealing with systemic oppression, systemic sexism, and systemic patriarchy, yeah? In regards to professions like nursing, like childcare, like teaching. And that has got to shift. In fact, I remember speaking to one teacher who taught a long time ago, and she was teaching, and I believe it was either her uncle or her brother were also teaching in the same school. They had the same job, similar jobs, and he was getting paid more because of his gender. So there was a time in Vancouver that that was happening.
Yeah, my hope at least, and this is just me, it might differ from your opinion, it might differ from viewer opinion, and that's totally okay. I'm here to learn and I want to absorb as many different opinions as possible. But I'm hoping that we at least move towards a meritocracy. In other words, the value you bring to the job or the value you bring to the
Yes,
role should be
yes,
more important than any other consideration.
absolutely. And one of my other commitments, besides my commitment to kids, is that we eventually live in the world where gender is not an issue, where we can see beyond everyone's gender and we see what people bring to the table, bring to the job, what kind of contributions they can make versus their gender. I'd love to see a world where that doesn't happen, and I'd love to see a Netflix series on that alone, because it still doesn't make sense to me how, when I look at a show like Game of Thrones, we're still dealing with the patriarch and oppression towards women and sexism and misogyny. Like, I don't get that in an alternate universe that this is still present. However, the book was written by a white straight man. So that's all I'm going to say about that.
Right, right, right. Well, I don't think there's an issue. Well, I think you'll understand what I mean when I say the whole thing. But
Tread carefully.
yes, I don't think there's an issue with gender. I think there's an issue with systematic division through media.
Okay.
If that did not exist, we would never have an issue with gender. In fact, we would not even have an issue with racism if it just didn't keep coming up as a conversation. So, because the things that we feed tend to grow.
Yeah,
And when we feed
absolutely.
racism, when we feed gender, when we feed these other things, they grow in importance and become a conflict.
Yeah. And on that note, this is what I want to say about public education is that all of those behaviors around racism and sexism and homophobia and transphobia, nobody is born with those perceptions
Right.
and ways of being in the world. Those are learned behaviors. And often, the first time they get present to that this is not okay to be this way and talk to people this way is when they come to a public school and they get those workshops and they have those lesson plans on different holidays around the world and on different, Chinese New Year, Kwanzaa, Hanukkah. That's the This is why public education is so important. And the second thing that's even more important about public education, or equally important, is that it is the one equalizer in society. With a really robust and well funded public education system, you can come from nothing. You can come from intergenerational trauma, poverty, whatever, and become a doctor, and become a lawyer, and become like somebody who wins awards at the UN, a famous writer, a famous physicist. Like, you can actually transcend your circumstances through adults who can make a difference for kids in the public school system, whether it be through sports, through academics, through arts, through extracurricular. Like, this is the one equalizer that will allow people to rise up from their circumstances. And without a well funded public education system, which is what's happening now, we're now getting separated into two groups: the haves, which go to private schools that have a maximum of 16 kids per class, and I'm competing with those kids when I'm in a grade 12 student in a public school that has 32. I'm competing with them for the same spots at university. What do you think is going to happen? Who's got the better education? Who's got more one-to-one support from the teacher? It's not going to be the kid in the public school. So
Yeah.
now we're creating this disparity with who gets to gets into university, gets the degrees, and it's the haves and not the have-nots.
Oh, it's inevitable. I think there's opportunities for have nots to improve their situation. I also know through personal experience that can be a very challenging road.
Yeah.
So I think it's miraculous. I actually think it's amazing that we can have a conversation like this and it's pretty civil. Like we agree on the important points. I just want our viewers and listeners to know that like Maria and I don't see eye to eye on all things political. However, the important point is education. Let's make it better. You
Yeah,
know?
the important thing is education. Let's make it better.
Yeah.
And, in education, you get to unlearn racism. You get to unlearn transphobia. You get to unlearn those things because those are learned things. And you do get in a well-funded education program, like provincially, you can grow up to be anything that you want. You can actually be anything that you want because you've got the foundation, you've been well educated, you've got the holistic learning, you're well rounded. Like you get to be anything that you want with a well funded public education system. And that is my hope, that is my dream. And I'm taking actions to make that happen.
And I think that's even truer when the system is tailored to the individual, not a cookie cutter format. We're kind of
Yes.
forced to, because of the number of people and funding and all those
Yes.
other
Yes.
factors, we're forced into a situation where we have to make a cookie cutter. This is the textbook and this is how we teach people. And it's so not like, because the most important things I needed to learn, most of them I did not learn in school. I
Yeah.
can say for sure that typing I learned in school, and that's served me very well for a very long time. Some people let's say let's do away with let's do away with typing so we can just use audio, and I'm like it's ridiculous. I'm not on board with that. If you want to use audio everything, go ahead. I don't need any more voice recognition privacy issues than I already have.
Yeah, and there aren't a lot of jobs out there in which you don't get compensated for your time. And in teaching, there's a significant amount of time, like coaching before and after school, coaching at
Oh,
lunch, coaching at recess, going on overnight trips, running clubs. There's a significant amount of volunteer time where we're asked by administrators to do it for the kids. And the impact of that is that when I'm away on the weekend or for a week, or I'm there before or after school doing coaching a team like when I coach field hockey, I'm then not present for my family. And I had a colleague once, she was an English teacher. She was phenomenal English teacher. But with all the marking she had to do, she took she took tabulation, like she kept a record of all the hours that she spent before 8:30 and after 3:30 doing schoolwork, whether it was lesson prepping, whether it was planning projects, marking essays. And when she realized that she was getting paid, guess how much an hour?
$12, $10.
Five. five
Yikes.
dollars an hour. She finally, when she got present to the reality that she was getting paid $5 an hour, she's like, that's it. This is not sustainable. This is not this does not value the time that I put into things. And it's not okay in the teaching profession to continue to ask teachers to do things and volunteer their time. It isn't okay. When I taught in a private school, I was compensated under the table $500 for each sport that I coached
Wow.
or club that I ran. I am not compensated in the public school system. And when she realized that, you know what she did?
What?
Well, she had two choices. She was either going to quit her job because $5 an hour, who wants to work for that? That's not even minimum wage.
Right.
Or she was going to get retrained, go back to university, and become a non-enrolling teacher, like a librarian or a counselor. And that's what she did. She became a librarian, which didn't require marking. It didn't require staying after school, coming before school, or even parent teacher interviews or meeting with the parents. None of that was required. She sat in the library, purchased books, organized the books, occasionally had classes come in to do research projects, occasionally did a unit and helped the teacher out, but that was it. She no longer coached, she no longer did overnight trips. She was done. She wanted to be compensated appropriately for the time that she was putting towards her job.
I think it's really important to draw those lines and sort of a parallel. Again, it's not exactly the same, but when I was a music teacher or guitar teacher, the thing I noticed was like certainly you can make a good income on a part-time basis, but it's still an illusion that you've got all this free time because it doesn't quite work that way. You
Mhm.
because especially since you're often teaching somewhere 3:30 and 9, so and you're
Yes.
still often driving to and from work. And
Yes.
if you're teaching at multiple students' homes, then you're driving a lot in between as well. When you
Yes.
finally make it home, what there's not a whole lot to do besides eat and go to bed
No, there
because
isn't.
you're pooped by that point. And so that was it's a good way to earn an income as a musician. And it's also if you wanted like I have friends who've done it. I have a friend who still does it. He's a music teacher and a producer and all his hours are full. And I couldn't believe like I taught 30 students at one point. I couldn't believe that there were people teaching 40. And then I found out there are people teaching 60 to 80 students a week. It's like their weekends are gone. Where's your
Hmm.
personal time? Where's your free time? I don't know.
Yeah.
Because you're also doing lesson prep and let's face it, teaching guitar I found was like you can't just be a teacher. That's part of the job role, but you're also a counselor, you're also a psychologist, you're also like helping the student adopt the mindset of okay, if I really want this, I've got to practice and I got to put in some time every week or I'm just going to forget what I learned and by the time I
Hmm.
come back next week cuz I only have 30 minutes with the teacher, well I've forgotten everything and got nothing out of the lesson.
Yeah. I taught for over a decade before I got present to the impact of my job on my personal life. I was marking Friday nights, Saturdays, Sundays. Long weekends were great because that gave me 2 extra days to mark and prep for school. And a couple of different things happened, including having that conversation with the librarian where she said, you know, you're making $5 an hour because I was doing the coaching, I was working full time, I was even working part time out at UBC. And I also knew that if I continued this way of teaching, which was the marking and the exams and all of that, if I maintained the curriculum the way it was supposed to be maintained, that I was going to burn out. There was no
Yeah.
way that I was going to last for 30 years. And
Yeah.
so, one of the decisions that I made for my own well being, physical and mental, my own well being, and being able to retire out of this job was to go back to university and
Yikes.
do my counseling training.
Wow.
So now the great thing about my job is I can arrive a minute before the bell rings. I can leave typically, unless there's a crisis, and that does happen, a minute after the bell rings, and I have no marking, I have no prepping, I don't write exams, I don't mark them. Um, but then on the other hand, I do have some emotionally charged situations that I sometimes, think about when I come home because I not only support students with their big feelings and how to self regulate them and how to get along with other kids and anything to do with school success, but I will often do suicide assessments of students to assess risk and then take whatever steps that need to be taken to keep that kid safe. And so, yeah, I've been very, I don't know, maybe fortunate. I've been very fortunate that in all the years that I have been working as a school counselor, that all my students have been safe. And not
Yeah,
every school counselor can say that.
it can't be easy work, but it sounds like there's at least some upsides to it. So I'm happy for that.
Hmm.
Susanna, my co-host, was watching it backstage, and so she left a few comments. One of them was, "I want to have a better system for students." So
Mm.
she's definitely in agreement there. And she had a random idea for a musical called "Helped, Hugged, or Heard."
Yeah, right. Great, great. Look at if people are really committed to educating our next global citizens, like who are the next global citizens, with which are the kids that are coming up through the system. If we're truly committed to bringing up global citizens that will resolve issues peacefully and not through wars, because we still have the war going on in Russia, we've got the Gaza Strip still going on. It can only be done through a robust, well funded public education system that's progressive.
Well, we definitely need the leaders of tomorrow. And
Yes.
I don't want to say that's all on the shoulders of the young people because that's not necessarily the case. I have a role to play too.
Hmm.
Because that was the one thing I used to go to church, and one of the churches was big on leadership, and that's what I liked about it. There was a personal development aspect to it. There was a leadership aspect to it, so I could learn something about that, and that was cool. I found that enjoyable. But their whole thing was like, the youth are our leaders, and we need to put everything there. And I just didn't agree with that because, like, well, I guess maybe you're looking at me as youth too, because at the time I probably was mid 20s, but what about me? Because like I have a platform that I need to stand on. I have things I need to accomplish. I have things I need to do in this world too. Where's the empowerment? Where's the support? Where's the funding? And I never felt that from that specific organization. So we have to balance it. Yes, we definitely need tomorrow's leaders. There's no qualms about that. And there's people that need to be empowered who are 20, 30, 40, 50 as well.
I agree.
Yeah.
Totally.
Well, I really enjoyed this conversation, Maria, and we'll have to have you back. We do have a little bit left here as far as final thoughts and things go. I have it that, well, technology really, because last year things weren't easy for me. It was kind of, in hindsight, it's pretty plain to see the castle was coming tumbling down so that a better structure could be built. And I know I'm not the only one that experienced that in 2024. It's certainly come out even amongst some pretty famous people that 2024 was a rough year, and yet it was very uncertain because I hadn't seen that kind of drought in my email inbox, in my texts, in the phone calls I was not getting, in every regard. Hadn't seen that kind of drought ever, or at least in a very, very long time. And my grandfather passed away, and I needed to find a way to go to a celebration of life out in Barhead, which is at about an hour, hour and a half outside of Edmonton. And that's when you stepped in and you mobilized the troops and you made it a reality. And so could not have completed that without you. Thank you.
Oh, I really got that acknowledgement. And I want to say that I was so moved and inspired about your relationship that you had with your grandfather that I wanted to, and I did this without your permission, I wanted to go onto my WhatsApp groups and share a video about what I was up to in regards to supporting you in being able to make that trip over to say goodbye to your grandfather from a counseling and a personal perspective. I have it that it's very therapeutic and important for people to be able to be with their loved ones, to say goodbye to their loved ones. And that was my commitment to you. I didn't really know you that well, and it didn't matter. I saw a need and I wanted to be a contribution to someone and be a massive contribution and see what would happen if I shared this with the world and who would be moved, touched, and inspired by what I was out to create to support you in doing what you needed to do.
Yeah. Thank you. And I would not be here either. I wouldn't be living where I'm living right now if not for you.
That's
And
another podcast.
yeah, it is for sure. As far as like I don't want to say it's exclusively a tribute to my grandfather, but the forthcoming book, The Fairy Letters, definitely touches on this type of stuff. And 2024 unfortunately ended up being a year where I lost one of the gang too, like one of the boys from earlier in life, elementary school. He passed away suddenly. And then a guest we had on the show in December, Brendan Hamilton, also passed away. shortly after, like I guess around Christmas time.
Mm,
So it was that kind of year.
mm,
But I do feel like there was not, I had the opportunity to grieve. It was not in the environments or context that I thought it would be,
mm,
but I did have that opportunity, and that means a lot. I don't feel like the Fairy Letters is complete, and that's Ferry. I know a lot of people think it's sort of in the world of Disney or whatever, and that's fun too. It is, but this one's not. Maybe I'll write that one later, but this one is Ferry because I was ferrying back and forth between Vancouver and Nanaimo a lot last year,
mm.
and I don't think that book's complete without me visiting Sunshine Coast. There's some letters to be written between there and here as well. So I either need to get on that trip right away, or I need to kick the milestone back a little bit as far as the release date. We'll see what happens, but that's coming, and it's very
Yeah.
relevant to this conversation too.
Absolutely. And I wanted to thank you, Dave, for allowing me to see an opportunity for myself when I created my life coaching business, Phoenix Inspired Coaching. What you might not know, and I think you may know this, is that I approached the school board because I think that one of the most biggest differences that I could make would be by having them hire a parent engagement or parent education coordinator to really support the parents in what's going on at home that they'd like to improve and what's happening at school. And when they were a no, I really thought that, well, I guess that's not going to happen. And then I thought, wait a minute, just because the school board said no to an initiative that I have doesn't mean that it's actually like not possible. And so I remember doing the looking and I looked to see what could I do that would make a difference because what I really get got present to in my work as a counselor is the amount of support that teachers and parents want, but they don't get through the traditional school system. So, my life coaching business is about, kids don't need parents and teachers who are perfect. They need parents and teachers who are present, and I help them show up in ways that transforms everything about their relationships with kids. So I wanted to thank you for supporting me in what I'm out to do and create in the world, which is loving and connected relationships with kids and having adults move from surviving their experience that they're having with the kids to absolutely thriving in their experience with kids.
Absolutely. I mean, you're a lot like family, especially given that my dad was a teacher, my mom sometimes taught, most of my aunts and uncles are teachers or have been teachers at different times.
Mm.
So, God have mercy on all of you, because I couldn't work that job, and it wouldn't support my lifestyle. But if it was a better position, or if the conditions were better, I would jump on it and I would do it.
Yeah, you would be a phenomenal music teacher.
Thank you.
Phenomenal.
Yeah,
Because how
I think.
you are and how you connect with people and your kind of calm presence, your groundedness, your creativity, the amount of experience that you have in the music industry. Um, and you're a productivity master. So you'd be perfect for schools and for doing workshops with music teachers on how to improve their productivity, which is something you want to
Hmm.
probably talk to me about. I can put you in contact with the um, Provincial Music Association for public school music teachers. They have conferences once a year and throughout the year where they invite people to come and do workshops with teachers.
Well, who knows, right? And I would have to learn some theory, or let's say some additional theory on top of what I currently know, to do it in a really great way. The great thing about being a guitarist is you can play very well without having to
Mm-hmm.
know all the theory
Mm-hmm.
that goes in behind it, because you develop
Mm-hmm.
an ear for it, you develop the technical capacity for it, and all that kind of stuff. But I guess you never know. I might. There's a possibility that I could be an honorary professor one day, and I occasionally teach a class at so and so. So that could happen.
Yeah, and if you ever wanted an invitation to come to a school and, meet with a class, maybe there's something you want to share with them, a lesson you want to do, a song you want to teach them, let me know and I'll set that up.
I did that in Japan, so it might be a fun thing. My grade six teacher took me all the way to his classroom, and I shared about Canada a little bit.
Well, that's great.
They weren't
That's-
they weren't super impressed, probably because there's abundance of available information on the internet nowadays. But
Well, you know what? You didn't show up with the mohawk and
yeah,
then the chains and the black and the big boots. That would have really impressed them.
well,
And
I was more skater than punk when I was in high school, so I had some
okay,
of that going on. Yeah.
great.
Well, thanks so much, Maria. This has been fantastic. Everyone can find her, or you can find her at phoenixinspiredcoaching.com. We'll request that she puts the links in the comments as well of this post. And Spark Infinity, it's been another, we don't know how to end this ever. So I'm just going to hit end stream. And thanks for joining us.
Bye
I'll
bye.
see you again real soon.
Thank you,
Tomorrow, well,
David, Andrew.
tomorrow actually. Yeah. Thanks,
Thank
Maria.
you. Bye.